Live from our studios, just steps from the fabulous Las Vegas Strip, it's The Business Lounge with your host, David Wright.
Hi, I'm your host, David Wright. Welcome to The Business Lounge, where we talk to real people about real business and real success. With me today, I have Jerry Ville. He is author, poet, teacher, but he's also an independent candidate for the U.S. Senate. Jerry, thank you for coming on the show.
David, it's fun to be here.
You know, it was amazing how I met you. And people say, well, how do you find people that come on your show? You were out having a petition signing to add yourself to the ballot for U.S. Senate.
Yes, exactly right.
And in doing that, it was like you had the plague. I mean, you had you had your tent set up, you had a table set up, you were offering water, and everybody seemed like they wanted to enter on the other side of the parking lot when they saw you. And I walked by and said I'd be right back, and you told me, well, yeah, he's probably not coming back. So I came back and we struck up a conversation, and I found out a little bit about you. But tell the audience why you think it's important to have a third party on the ballot or a third party candidate on the ballot this year.
Well, I think it's been important all years. I really do. There's a lot of political turmoil this year. I did really not get into it for that reason. I've always wanted to do that. I've always known that there are kind of three levels of participation. You're a good citizen, you're a voting good citizen, and you actually try to get involved and participate in the election arena. And so that's where I am right now. I'm trying to get involved in the election arena. I think I bring an awful lot of strong tools to expression, to an understanding of politics, and I don't think necessarily that that's a given in a lot of cases. I've been watching, as probably a lot of your viewers have been watching, the political ads, and essentially what I'm learning is the female candidate, she's been a bad girl, and the male candidate, he's been a bad boy. And I don't know.
And Santa's not coming for Christmas to their house, right?
And I don't know that that's really the kind of information people need in order to make an informed decision. So it's not easy to put yourself out into this arena. I'm finding it's difficult at times, but I do think that we've gotten to the point with the media where people are kind of becoming more reactive than participatory. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and we were talking about that same situation, and he's very involved with the process, and I have a couple of friends that probably will be running for office here in the near future as well. But we were talking about how some communities or cultures, they take a 100-year approach to that culture. So they're looking at the future's future, not tomorrow. And I think that's one of the failures of candidates today. I know the field, the two primary party people have about 80% of, quote, the polling vote right now. There's about 15% undecided. What platform or what policies would you look to change, or how would you look to affect them?
Essentially, the base of my platform is compassion. I really do think that we have to pay attention to people in a compassionate way in order to bond the community again. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes a lot of sense.
The community is very unbonded. You have reactions, and the reactions don't really coordinate with one another, and that's not a bonded community. And when we have so many children, as you know, I've been a teacher for 13 plus years in Clark County, an English teacher, which I've enjoyed immensely, but I've had so many instances where children were hungry, not clothed properly, legally blind, couldn't see the board, and there were all kinds of impediments to getting those things taken care of. And you can't really begin to establish a real bonded community when you've got those kind of problems, especially the food problem. You know, I know there are a lot of efforts to work on that, but I think it needs to be coordinated a little better, and it needs to be less of a show. You as well as I know that around Thanksgiving time, boy, does that ever get attention, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
It does. Gets a lot of media attention. But it really, you could find stories year-round. I'm not asking them to revamp their news format. You know, that's not the point. But you don't have to wait till Thanksgiving to make that effort. And I've felt very strongly about this for a long time. One of the things I did, as you know, I've restored a 1925 Model T, and it's a Huckster, which was an old farm truck. And one of my goals is I'm going to get donations of food and drive that Huckster full of food somewhere where they take food and put a little spotlight on the issue. And you could say, seeing that beautiful 1925 Huckster farm truck, this is a problem that's been around a long time. If I'm delivering food to an organization that's going to help distribute it.
You know, that's an interesting point, and it's, you know, I think about that, and I know that hungry children, their attention isn't towards the lesson you're trying to provide for them. If I'm hungry, I don't have the nutrients to nourish my body. I can't really look at feeling secure about my own environment, and it leads to all kinds of problems, whether that be disciplinary problems. If the children in the home don't have food, the likelihood of them having two parents or parents that help them with their lessons is greatly diminished. So, you know, you talked about the restoration of the truck and driving it to locations, and the first thing that flashed in my mind was the depression. And I think we're kind of in that right now in a lot of ways. So when you look at food as one, would you agree that education would be number two then for you?
Oh, education feeds off of everything, really. And if food is just the baseline, I mean, you can't have hungry children. I had the occasion, you know, there are things that happen in the course of a teaching career. I had to escort a girl who was in trouble from one part of the campus to the dean's office. And she got on the phone with her mother, and she was plaintive. She was plaintive, but she said, "Mama," she said, "I'm hungry." You know, she was trying to explain to her mother why she was in this predicament. And you know, I mean, there are things that are said at times that just go right to you. You know, there was nothing artificial about that. And you know, my only job was to get her from one point to another, and you know, and I just had the opportunity to hear that. And the legal problems with immigrant children are heartbreaking. They're you got to, you know, remember they're born here and they're U.S. citizens.
Correct.
Just as I was born here and I'm a U.S. citizen. For instance, with the legal blindness problem, I had several students. I had a student, lovely girl. I'll just give you one example. A lovely girl who, her grades started to fall. She was smart, her grades fine. I didn't understand why. So at the end of one class, I walked up to her and I said, "Can you see the board?" And she said, "No." And I said, "Well, when you come in tomorrow, just go sit up front, would you please, for me, and we'll see how things go." And so she was there, and I was smiling. I was feeling so proud of myself. You know, here we got her closer to the board. And so a couple of days later, I was smiling and went over. I said, "Can you see the board now?" And she said, "No, I can't." Well, it ended up she was legally blind. She needed glasses desperately. And her parents were illegal immigrants. They would not sign the forms that would make it possible for us to help her. So working with the nurse who really got most of the credit, I explained to her what was going on. She explained to me what was going on. She took the initiative, I didn't. She went to a new Walmart that was opening, and she went and talked to the optometry department, and they said, "As part of our grand opening, we'll take care of that child." That's nice, isn't it?
It's very nice.
You know, it's not the kind of thing you hear every day. Well, she hated me because she's a pretty girl, and those glasses were so thick, you know, and she refused to wear them, and her father got on her. And I don't know whatever happened to her. It was toward the end of the year. But it's really a good example of what, and I had other children who were legally blind, and there was really nothing I could do. I just did what I could, and there were some efforts, and I think there might still be some efforts to deal with that problem. I haven't seen or heard much of it lately, but we can only hope. But that's what I mean about compassion. Where do we put a spotlight as a politician? Does that make,
it does. So much of my background says that's exactly what you're supposed to do. When you get to a point where you can affect change, you should affect that change. You shouldn't just sit and wait, okay? I have heard food, which I'm involved with. I've heard education, and I've heard health care. And those things are sorely lacking here in Las Vegas and throughout the country. They're probably magnified somewhat because of the cultural mix that's here. One of the other things is immigration. Where would you like to see the discussion on immigration go?
I'd like to see it start with those children. Let's say that we cannot come to some agreement about immigration. It certainly looks that way. It's a very, very contentious thing. Carve out an area where the children are exempt from that problem. I remember, here's another example, which is a parallel. Maybe this will help. When I was living in Los Angeles, of course, you got a huge street drug program. And I had some people who wanted to put me forward for mayor. And so they would take me places, and I'd have to talk to people. That was a lot of fun, by the way. I said to them, what we really need to do in this city is create a drug-free zone where these people with these problems can go, they can get the medical care, they can get whatever they need in the way of breaking that addiction or whatever it is, and they don't have to worry about being arrested. And we can concentrate our effort in that way. And that was warmly received. And I'm really essentially saying the same thing about these children of immigrants who are U.S. citizens, no worse than you or I, and they're caught in this argument. Let's create a free zone where we can take care of them.
That makes total sense, and one of the challenges are that people are so vested in their opinion or their stake in the matter. Where would you see, if everyone said, yes, Jerry, that makes sense, we're going to do that, where would you see those funds coming from, or where would you like to take funds from and put towards that type of effort?
David, I'm deeply concerned, as so many people are, about how money-driven politics are. Now, I didn't realize how really severe it is until I stepped into this arena a few months ago, okay? I had to pay a fee to become a candidate. No problem. I'm happy to do that. I have been inundated with offers to advance my campaign with just huge price tags, and it's discouraging. Okay, so where would the money come from, you're asking me? It's pretty well known that candidates or senators and representatives are really, how should I put this, bathed in offers of money, right?
I think that's true.
Well, instead of feathering my own nest, I'm going to have to live, of course. Put some of that money in that direction. I'm not going to be looking for looking out entirely for myself. I'm going to have to take care of myself. Mm-hmm. But it's not going to be a perpetual reelection effort in which that money that does come my way ends up in my coffers. We have one candidate for this office. I'm not going to give the figure. I got a kick out of it. That candidate has X million dollars in cash on hand. And I thought to myself, wow, that's pretty
lucky
impressive.
To be you, right?
That's pretty impressive. And I really don't have anything negative to say about the other candidates. I have no interest in that kind of a campaign, And I just won't go there. I would probably be delighted to meet any of them and shake their hand and chat with them, and I'm sure I'd be enriched in some way. So I wouldn't go to any voter and say, I'm the only choice you have. You know, it's not that sort of thing. No, that's not so. If something I say is helpful or you think will be helpful, I would appreciate the vote. But other than that, no.
Well, I appreciate that idea because I've grown up in an environment where you are taught that 10% of what you have should go out to affect the lives of others. And you can call it whatever you want to call it, but that 10% of what you have that advances you in any way should go to others. Would that be something that you could get behind, or 5% even? If I've got $10 million and I give 5%, I think you can affect change in a lot of people's lives.
For me, that would be low. I don't know why. I guess one of my weaknesses is I've always been very generous, I guess. You know, I've never, I can remember being at Key West and I was working in construction on the airport there. And I was a guest of the main construction company because I was an ancillary worker, extra worker for them. And we went out to dinner, and I was their guest. And the guy who bought dinner was like, he was the chief operating officer of this effort. He left a quarter tip for the waitress. And you know, and I never forgot that. I was embarrassed. I found it, and he, you know, was just untroubled by that. You know, I just found that very difficult. You know, and so maybe that story is worthless. But
no. What it really does talk to is how sometimes people with money forget that there are people in need. You know, I've done a lot of things in my life, and one of the things that struck me one day is I was on my way to work, and there was a kid crossing the street. He didn't have any shoes. He had a T-shirt on. It's 10 degrees outside. And it literally stopped me in my tracks and said, "What are you doing?" And that really started me to focus on giving back to the community. Just that one moment with that one kid, because I thought, you know, that could have been me very easily, trying to make my way through life in 10-degree weather with basically just a pair of raggedy tennis shoes and a T-shirt on. So I agree with you 100%. So if I know there are, 4 other independent candidates running, or 3?
I'm not current on that, David.
Yeah. So I think there are more. Yeah, there are more.
Yes.
There's a libertarian candidate, I think. There's a whole list of declared Republicans, but there's only one Republican that's really going to be nominated, as well as on the Democratic side. If you could talk to first the Republican candidate about what you would like to see changed, and then talk to the Democratic candidate on their side what they should look or would want to change.
Thank you for that very, very helpful question. The Republican candidate, of course, is a member of the military. I believe he's a general in the reserves.
That is correct.
And he's a doctor. And one of the things I'm deeply concerned about is the kind of attention we give to our combat veterans as opposed to our stateside veterans. And the reason I say that is I was in the Army during the Vietnam era, and I was in the platoon when they were telling us where we were going, and they sent me to Fort Dix. And a lot of those other fellows went to Vietnam, of course. And then there was another part of that. When I was at Fort Dix, they had me in a billeted area alone, and they would send in the returning veterans from Vietnam, the combat veterans, and they would be in billet with me while they were being processed out. And so I got to talk to a lot of them. And it became very clear to me that the two experiences were very, very different. They had really experienced a kind of horror. And I've always been a typist and good at it, and so that really put me right in an office where I was taking care of reports.
Okay.
And so I never regretted that. I was not terribly mature. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into that, you know. But you could be immature and go to the combat theater, and more than likely things are going to change pretty rapidly.
Absolutely.
In terms of your awarenesses. And I don't know how far you want me to go with this, but I have a friend of many years. He's like a brother to me. He's also a typist. He went to Vietnam, and I went stateside. So here are the two of us. I'm typing stateside in a completely safe environment. He's typing in a combat area where there are explosions going on around him all the time, where people are dying all the time, where he's lucky to get through that and come back home. And so, you know, it's just there's no real comparison in terms of, I've never really even considered myself a veteran. It was only 5 years ago I decided to go and register as a veteran. I said, well, you know, I did it. It wasn't beautiful, but I did it. And they lost all my records. They had no records. Fortunately, I had a few little pieces of paper, and they were Greek. They said, well, let's have those. I said, sure, you can have those. But they had no record. And so that could put me in a position where I could make some pretty fabulous claims for myself, couldn't I? Yeah. Well, you know, we know those horrible stories where people do that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, but it's not that kind of thing. So my concern is for combat veterans. The suicide rate among combat veterans is horrible, and it continues to be horrible. And yet it's only a little snippet of news every now and then, you know, and there's just that needs to be addressed. And again, how can you do that? I don't know at this point, but it is a concern.
Now to the Democratic side, what would you have them focus on?
Gee, that's a harder one for me to answer. I guess at that point, if you're going to put me in that position with that candidate, I would say, gee, I'm looking for some agreement. Mm-hmm. Can we work on the agreement thing, because it seems to be almost completely gone. There's no discussion almost. You know, it's as I said earlier, the primary ads that are running now are she's a bad girl and he's a bad boy. You know, I mean, I don't see that. Could the two of them get together and see if they had some common? You know what I'm saying? And I would say to her, could you do that? Could you do that? Because I don't see that she's. I don't know that much about her. She's been in positions of responsibility, which is very important, and she seems to galvanize people in the right way. So I would say to her, please become a conciliatory force here, because it's desperately needed.
Okay. Well, I do want to thank you for being on the show. I appreciate your time and just your insight looking forward. So where can people find out more about your campaign and you as an individual?
Well, that's a very nice question, and I do appreciate it. I would go to a website. The website is mine, www.villa, V-I-L-L-A, studio, all one word, .com. And there's even pictures of my Model T Ford there, which might be the most interesting part of the website. I hope you enjoy it. And there's information. I make a short statement about my candidacy, which is really, in a nutshell, what we've been talking about. So, David, I can't thank you enough. I've enjoyed this so much.
All right. I appreciate you being on the show. I really do.
Thank you.
For the Business Lounge, this is David Wright. Until the next time, may all your cares be small.